Hey gang, Dre here from the desk of Motorsport 101. Just a quick heads up on a couple of things. First of all, forgive us, Cam Buckley's still suffering from a fair amount of COVID, and he does cough every once in a while over the course of this hour or so. Forgive us, it's genuinely quite hard to edit it out when it's in the middle of him talking or monologuing, so hopefully it's not too disruptive. Second of all, forgive us for not putting this one out on early access. We wanted to get this out before the Australian Grand Prix, and now with the latest breaking news that the race has been brought forward by a day due to the high risk of winds on Sunday, we thought it was best to get this out now instead. Thanks for your patience, and as always, we hope you enjoy the show. Guaranteed to be slightly less chaotic than a Petit Le Mans finish, welcome back to Motorsport 101.
Dre, what are you talking about? The finish was a whimper because all the competitors for the title were dead.
That's exactly my point. Hey guys, welcome to episode 479 of Motorsport 101. Cam Buckley owes me a very long apology for getting me into sports cars, and he's now going to spend the next 10 minutes doing so on this episode about MotoGP's Indonesian Grand Prix. It totally makes sense. We're a well-organized podcast.
I apologize for nothing other than the continued allowance of Pipo Derani and Dennis Anderson to live.
I actually watched it. Yeah, you are so not.
Never be over it.
For those who don't know, last weekend, obviously being a guy that works for WTF1 now, and obviously race weekends, I'm pretty busy. This was a rare non-F1 race weekend in the back end of the year, because now we're in the block of 5 Grand Prix in the next 6 weeks to close out the year. Yay! I got to watch Petit Le Mans, all 10 hours of it. Yeah, I was like, I'm going to stick this out for the course. I'm going to try and enjoy one of the headline sports car events of the year. And
it was a train wreck. It was a goddamn mess. The car that I was rooting for in the title got killed via contact via dentist.
Yeah, just like one bonk, second bonk, and then the third bonk was what took out the Porsche. I was like, oh, come on.
Yeah. The Inception McLaren was fused to the number 6 Porsche, like something out of The Fly.
Had to be surgically removed.
and then you know the final battle. I mean, if you're if you're on the inside of someone, God, to just hold your line, please.
Right. For those who need a bit of context, maybe aren't the biggest sports car fan in the world, this was the 2 titled contending cars. These are the 2 favourites to win the title, going into the final hour of Road Atlanta. And if you ever know that track, it's quite low down, but it's an uphill turn 1 apex. Pipo Derani has the inside line. Felipe Albuquerque on the outside tries to go the long way, gets an excellent run going down the main straight. Tries to go around the outside of turn 1. Pipo Derani refuses to hold his line, knowing Felipe Albuquerque is on the left of him. Punts him, puts him in the wall, puts Felipe in the hospital for the night. Thankfully, he's relatively okay. And it leads to the number 31 of him and Alex Sims.
Alex Sims and
winning the title.
Jack Aiken isn't the title winner, but the +1. Yeah. Overall, we had some good times. We had some bad times, and makes you want to throw up, personally. I wish RJ was here, because RJ was boots on the ground along with King. And all I would say is that through things that we've heard from them, things that I've heard from other individuals with boots on the ground, well, this was a shit show.
Yeah.
Top to bottom.
Yeah, like this that was 10 hours of my time I'm not getting back in a hurry. That race was a mess. You try, but you know, it was just one of those races where the driving standards were just bad, generally speaking.
To say nothing of the dentistry.
Yes. I tried. I tried, but hey, that's a weekend off for you. They can't all be winners.
Dentistry, like the P2 pitching the Ferrari into the 6 Porsche was some wisdom tooth extraction.
Oh, that was a full-blown root canal right there. Beautiful done. Beautifully done. But we are here for one predominant reason, that is to review MotoGP's 2023 Indonesia Grand Prix. We're back at the Bay at Mandalika. No rain shaman required this time, thankfully. But this title fight, it's taken another twist.
I'm just convinced at this point no one actually wants to win the title. Maybe the real MotoGP champion will be the friends we made along the way.
Or as Sasha's political the friends we lost along the way, given all the injuries we've had.
That hits a little too close to home considering this year.
Yes, we'll get into some of that details of the main event picture and the title scene, because we thought Jorge Martin was going to double up again this weekend until he didn't. We'll also talk about some of the extra +1 stories. There were some fun ones across the field as well. A little bit about Johann Zarco, who turns out won't be going to Repsol Honda next year, despite Marc Marquez's departure. That's one way to piss off the Frenchman before he even started his time at Honda. Good to know. And a little bit about some interesting blogs that came out. There's rumours circulating that Bridgepoint, the parent company of Dorna Sports, might be selling their share. We'll have to wait and see. But it's led to some interesting dialogues that we thought we'd talk about a little bit on the show this week in general. But first of all, before we get into that, here's the places you can find us real quick. We're on Twitter at Dre_WTF1, CBuckley917. RJ's back next week. He's moved straight from Petit Le Mans to the United States Grand Prix in Austin,
allowing him
Texas.
far too much fun, Dre.
I know. And I thought Vegas was cool. I'm just like, no, my man's doing 3 great big Grand Prix paddocks in 3 weekends. I'm so jealous of him. RJ, have a good one over there in Austin, buddy. Say hi to Otmar for me if he's down there. We like Otmar here. We miss him. But enjoy the show, big man, and enjoy your time out there. Hopefully we get a decent Grand Prix. Because COTA low-key, I think, has kind of become quite underrated on the F1 calendar. But maybe that's a take for Hot Takes Wednesday instead. But if you want to find us personally, you can find us on Twitter.
Take.
No, I don't think so either. The podcast itself is at motorsport_101. You can, if you really like us, you can back us on Patreon, patreon.com/motorsport101. You can back us there. Early access, $5 gets you access to all of our shows. 10 for the supporters general of our Discord server. You can listen to these episodes live as we're going out. As Jason is right now, he's listening in. Hi, Jason. And he says in the chat here, the injury list has the same length as this injury reports Urinating Tree has at the end of This Week in Sports Ball.
Congratulations, Honda.
Jason's not wrong there, and boy, if you saw This Week in Sports Ball this week, my God, that was the longest injury rundown I think I've ever seen. Ever.
He needed a glass of water after he went through that list.
The football gods have no mercy. Amen. And if you want to see some more thoughts from yours truly on the race itself in Indonesia, you can check out the blog section of motorsport101.com on the website. I wrote a little bit more about all of that and my definitive Marc Marquez is leaving Honda post as well, because I didn't actually do one. Was quite busy, annoyingly, when the actual news dropped last week. Also, didn't get a chance to give her a mention, but I will do on the show as well. A massive thank you to Lila Oakes for the fantastic Marc Marquez ex Grassini mock-up she did. It just absolutely pops seeing Marc Marquez on a Grassini already. Fantastic artwork. Go check our website out at highlalila.com, HIYALYLA.com. She does fantastic work with Photoshop and motorsport concepts and things like that. And massive thanks to her for letting us use the artwork on the show. Thank you, Lila. Much appreciated. And we really, really appreciate that. So thank you very much. Shout out to her. Let's get into it. Let's do MotoGP's Indonesian Grand Prix.
Another title fight twist took place in Indonesia as the sport begins its, overloaded run of 6 races in 7 weeks to close out the season. Jorge Martin wins the sprint. He looks comfortable at the front with a dozen laps to go in the Grand Prix. Goes wide and crashes, opening the door for Pecco Bagnaia to storm through the field and win from 13th on the grid after he failed to exit Q1.
Didn't make Q2 automatically. Had to go into Q1. Failed to get out of Q1 because he was knocked out by his own teammate, Enea Bastianini. That was a surprise. Remember him? He's back. He's got a healthy shoulder for the first time all year. God.
Took that win ahead of Maverick Vinales and Fabio Quartararo on the podium.
His best ride of the year. That was a phenomenal performance. My God.
One of the rides of the year. And with it, Bagnaia reclaims the championship lead that he lost during the sprint and is now 18 points clear. How do we define the state of the title picture now? Dre, does anyone want to win this championship?
I don't know anymore. Like, Jorge, I thought we were over this. I really did. For those who didn't see this maybe, or maybe only saw highlights, Jorge Martin got the start of the gods in this race. It was one of the best single starts off a line I have ever seen. He started, I think it was, back end of row 2 and was leading by 3 bike lengths by the time he hit the braking zone into turn 1. It's if you've ever played like an F-Zero game, you timed that boost start to perfection. It was absolutely magnificent. And Martin was comfortably clear. He was setting lap records. He was 3 seconds clear of the field at one point, and exactly as Cam alluded to, went wide at turn 10, picked up some dirt on the tyre, and then when he broke to switch for turn 11, Cam, you know the phrase.
Don't get to say this too often anymore.
No.
It's usually a Honda these days.
It's a throwback.
Death, taxes, Ducati tucks the front.
Hey!
Say
the line, Cam.
it's back in winning time, because we talked about it at length last time out that this is winning time. This is more or less equal running on equal machinery between Pecco and Martin for the last run of races. And I just don't think anyone wants to win the title. Pecco screws up qualifying, is mediocre in the sprint. Martin screws up the main race. Bezecchi's not healthy.
Yeah.
Brad Binder keeps spearing people. I don't think Marc Marquez keeps tucking the front because the Honda's shit.
Yeah.
Fabio Quartararo's riding a bike with a 1cc engine. No one has the provisions to win this title.
Yeah, well, that means only one thing for it. The person that's going to win the championship is going to be Miguel Oliveira. We have no choice. He has the least amount of downside of any rider out there.
Well, given the current rumors, he might want to get this one in while he can.
Exactly. More on that in a bit.
He had the opportunity to take 25 points. Instead, he not only dropped those points, he dropped them directly to Pecco, because Pecco was back to something resembling his best. He was a mess in qualifying, a mess in the sprint. Turned it on for the race.
That was the first time anybody's won a MotoGP race from row 5 since the Turkish Grand Prix of 2006.
Was that one Marco Melandri?
I believe it was at Shanghai. Sorry, it was Istanbul. Remember when he used to race in Turkey? That was a thing. God. Yeah, that was the last time he had a row 5 winner in MotoGP. You don't win from back there. And don't get me wrong.
Now with the state of the bikes as well.
And with the state of the bikes, it's been so hard to overtake people. And the fact that I still am not fully convinced Bagnaia was stupid fast. Like, I think a big part of the reason he won this race was because he had the hard front tyre.
Yeah, because this was brutal on tires. In fact, Michelin told the field after practice and after the sprint, do not use the soft. You might not even want to use the medium. And the Ducati typically, it's not a fan of the hard front because of the things that the Ducati is not good at. It doesn't always have the best front end. But in this case, with the wear being so high, it actually ended up working out for him.
I think Aprilia might have thrown away an easy dub this weekend because this is exactly their sort of conditions where it's low grip, very dusty sort of surface because they don't race around this track very often. And in that sort of low grip environment, the Aprilia shines. And they decided to all put the softs on. What the
don't
fuck
get
were
it.
you doing, Aprilia?
And we know that bike does have occasional tire wear issues. I don't understand what they were doing. Because this should have been...
The only one who didn't toss it was Maverick Vinales, and he was on medium.
Yeah. And it showed that he had something resembling pace, not of the Ducatis, but certainly enough to keep them in range. And indeed, the state of the track actually ended up really kind of messing with a few of the bikes. And somehow Fabio Quartararo, one of the Ride of the Year candidates, because he dragged that bike where it had no right to be.
He finished less than a second off the win. It was incredible how Fabio Quartararo was genuinely competitive for the win on the Yamaha. According to Matt Oxley, he said that because of the way the hard tire was composed, apparently they brought a thicker carcass specifically on the hard tire. It apparently mitigated a lot of Yamaha's problems compared to Ducati, and that's what led to Fabio being genuinely competitive out there using the hard front. And again, you wouldn't normally expect that in MotoGP, but this is this is the way. But Indonesia is strange when it comes to tires. It was like this last year as well, before the rain came down on Sunday, where nobody quite... That's the impression that I overall get from this race weekend. Nobody knew what tires to run. And that made for a messy Grand Prix where, look, Bagnaia won from 13th. I'm not fully convinced he was that much faster than everybody else. I think it was just a matter of... And
he wasn't. He was getting run down at the end of the race. Martin, before he dumped it and he put it out there, he just lost concentration.
Yeah.
He just made a stupid mistake, which he cannot... I mean, he has the pace. The pace has never been the problem.
No.
It's been, can he harness it? Can he do those amazing lap times without doing something stupid? For 4 or 5 races there, it was working pretty well for him, but the old Martin cropped up again, and it was a 30-point swing, Dre, in clutch time.
Yeah, that was the math I had that as. I think if Jorge Martin, assuming all things being roughly equal, if Martin wins that race and Bagnaia finishes in second, he leaves Indonesia 12 points in front. He's now minus 18. And that's a massive difference. If you're leaving Indonesia with back-to-back double victories, you've got Bagnaia under real pressure.
Yeah, you've got the ball has to be in Pecco's court. He has to go out and try to beat you. And up to that point on the weekend, I mean, it was looking like one of Bagnaia's dud weekends on the year.
Yeah.
Until the race. And then Martin just throws it away.
Yeah, it's just poor racecraft from Jorge Martin. And look, like you can get away with this every once in a while when you're a plucky underdog and your average finish is 6th. You can't afford to do that now in Moto. Like, you're now a championship, arguably favorite on raw speed right now.
Someone did the math on this. I was looking at Pecco's currently leading the title on 62% of all points available.
Mm-hmm.
He did it on less last year. What was it, like 53% of the points available? If either of these two would just knock off their bullshit and bring home more of the points, they would be miles out in front. But both of them just keep throwing points on the ground.
Yeah, these are the 2 fastest riders in MotoGP right now, without any shadow of a doubt, and yet they both have inherent flaws in their mental arsenal that is holding them back from running the field over.
Well, and the other two riders that have had the proven, fighting for a title, well, they're both on shitboxes right now.
Yeah.
In the Bad Bike Championship, Fabio just sent a message like he is still him. He just does not have the bike to show it, nor will he for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's disappointing to say the least. I mean, like, it's going to go. We've got 5 races to go over the last 6 weeks of this championship campaign, and it's going to come down to who makes the least amount of mistakes at the rate this is going right now. And now Martin has more than got enough raw speed to beat Bagnaia head-to-head. He's the only man in the field I could say that about right now. And that alone
because he's on the same equipment. The problem here is that it's like every 4 or 5 races, one of them throws a race in the drink.
Yeah, and that's what it might boil down to, because, like I said, we just saw a 30-point swing, and honestly, I think there's going to be a bit of needle between these two in this title fight now, because this was mentally, I thought this was very interesting after the rest. I'm not normally the mind games expert, because I think a lot of it is bullshit, but what I will say is that Jorge Martin was very flippant in how he talked about this crash, said he lost concentration. He said, oh, well, it's been 14 races. I was bound to make a mistake eventually. No, Martin, you've made plenty of mistakes this year.
You went bowling in Austria.
Like that
and ruined your own race as a result.
That was less than 6 weeks ago. Like, no, it's not been your first mistake in 14 race weekends this year.
He made a mistake in Japan. He just got away with it.
Yeah, and it
could have very easily been a down.
Yeah, if he puts it in if he puts the front wheel in the gravel in those conditions, he's toast. Yeah. And that's the end of his race weekend. And Bagnaia takes 25 full points rather than the 20 he got when he beat him over the line in Japan. I mean, look, the way we're looking at it right now, Martin is still talking like a man who's just finishing the odd race win here and there and is finishing in the top 6 in the title. This is a different ball game. You're now competing for a world championship. You're now on the brink of making history as the first person in the MotoGP era to win on a satellite machine. We've never had this before. Not really, not to this degree, where a genuine customer's got a real, absolute, arguably favourite to win the title level opportunity here right now. And you're talking about, it's not a big deal. It is a big deal. He just blew 30 points.
Yeah. And
it's a massive deal.
And Pecco's vulnerable. Visibly vulnerable has been since the Barcelona crash. I mean, he had his legs run over by a motorcycle.
Right. And
got away with it.
And Pecco,
relatively speaking.
And Pecco gave it back when he won that race. He put the hand to the ear like, can you hear me now, basically, after winning that race. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't think this win from 13 was as impressive as some people are making out to be. I think Bagnaia had a lot of help to get to this point. There was a lot of really silly riding in front of him in the early portions of this race and behind him as well, guys who you'd expect to contend but didn't. But it seems like Bagnaia is starting to play into the mind games of this title fight a little bit more now. They've been very friendly, these two, over the course of this title rivalry so far, but now it seems like the serious business is about to begin, and that's what will make it interesting, because Bagnaia does not normally act like that when he wins a Grand Prix. He feels like he's been overlooked. And I've mentioned this point in a couple of blogs before. Does it feel like Francesco Bagnaia is the best rider in the world sometimes? Because it feels like he doesn't get talked about like he is.
Well, I think a lot of the discussion goes around to his equipment.
Mm-hmm.
And this time, last year, he was on, the factory Ducatis were on effectively their own mix of bike. And Pramac effectively got crippled for the whole year because the actual full GP22 had major rideability problems.
Yes.
The hybrid 21-22 bike was the move. Now they're both on GP23s. They've pretty much had 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. They've had pretty much the same season up to this point. Yeah. Martin's probably been a bit more reckless around other riders. Bagnaia's probably made maybe one more unforced mistake.
Sure.
But then there's this one. So now they've both thrown away a relatively comfortable win from the front.
Yeah, a big gimme, because Bagnaia's was Kota.
Yeah, as he starts to break rins, he just folds the front and crashes. And it just feels like when you watch someone like Fabio put together what he does on the Yamaha, knowing how poor the Yamaha is, when you see Mark ripping results out of the Honda, don't get me wrong, he was a mess this weekend. All the Hondas were a mess this weekend.
He openly admitted he didn't even try Marquez this weekend. He was like, I wasn't even pushing. He didn't feel like that was a point. He's phoning it in at this point.
Yeah, I think he has completely mentally checked out of Honda, because what's it worth? I think he'd rather just low-side it. Rather than high-side himself into the hospital, it's better to just drop the bike simple.
Yeah.
In a terrible sort of way, and get back up and walk back to the pits. Because every other Honda was basically running dead last. Morbidelli looks like he's phoning it in at this point. He's getting on a much better bike next year. there's so many candidates for, that top echelon of motorcycle rider right now. And it only feels like 2 of those are really on a Ducati right now. And the 2 of them are both fucking up repeatedly.
Yeah, it's we would call this title fight, if it was a person, a quote messy bitch, because that's what it feels like right now. And there is no clear-cut answer as to where this championship is going right now. And yeah, like Martin on paper is the favorite. I don't know how much Bagnaia is close to 100% of his maximum, given the Catalunya injury and the fact that, Indonesia wasn't really a prototypical MotoGP race, but that's kind of what makes it interesting. And now we're going to the great equalizer next weekend, Phillip Island. Now that is going to be fascinating to see who's going to be in contention during that one, because we all know Phillip Island balances the books unlike any other race on the MotoGP calendar every year.
I tend to think, given the current form book, I don't know how much of that we're going to see this year. I think it's going to be very dependent on how windy it is, because they actually have set aero regs for Phillip Island that the teams can take basically their side pod wings off.
Yes.
See, they can police aerodynamics. They just don't, because normally it's not almost a guaranteed crash, rather a likely crash. And it's going to depend on how good I think this GP23 really is in that kind of environment. Because again, last year's bike was a little bit compromised. Last year's bike, the best one around this track was the fucking Suzuki. And that ain't here anymore.
Exactly.
Alex Rins breaking like a madman into turn 1.
Yeah, absolutely mental stuff. A couple other little minor things to address. We talked a little bit about Fabio Quartararo over the course of this weekend, and again, a phenomenal ride from him. A phenomenal ride to Fabio Di Giannantonio as well. Deserves a lot of
top independent,
4th place, career high finish from him. In tears in the Parc Ferme after the race was over. It was actually really genuinely touching to hear his words about it, because obviously, if you probably put 2 and 2 together, it was officially confirmed on the Thursday of that past weekend that Marc Marquez is going to Gresini, and it'll be at Fabio Di Giannantonio's expense. Digi's fighting for a job at the moment, and he brought home his best career result directly in the aftermath of knowing that he was about to lose his job. Props to him. He openly said that, look, I have my heart on my sleeve. It's been very hard for me this year, knowing that this news has been hanging over my head for most of the year. And he just wants to prove himself. And, well, that's certainly... that goes a long way to help Fabio, certainly.
It's a shame, because if he had done more of that throughout this year, he might not be losing his seat. But up to this point, he's been
not great,
really messy.
Yeah, the worst of the 8 Ducatis. That. There's no getting around that. And he just said, look, the words that touched me the most is where he said, look, this result proves I had this in me the whole time, that they just needed to be more patient with me. To which I say, you're probably right, but unfortunately, motorsport is not a game of patience anymore. The days of the project rider are done for the most part. We now need results immediately, because these grids are getting more and more competitive and more ruthless. We talk about it in this sport and in F1,
Yeah, I can't agree more. And really, like, with the patience aspect, I mean, it's been 3/4 of the year. And throughout the year, it's been clear last of the Ducatis. And when you look at him up against Alex Marquez, who people were questioning why he's even in MotoGP, basically that he is a nepotism hire through and through. Alex Marquez has folded him like a calzone this year.
Yeah. And this is year 2 for Fabio as well. Like, rookies are rookies. You always give them a longer rope. But the year 2, it's a sad story for Fabio, because like you can clearly tell that this means the world to him, and it was a phenomenal performance in a vacuum. Do not get me wrong. So it's just a shame that he might have left it too late. Or hey, who knows? He might end up at Honda. We'll have to wait and see. And also, before we'll get to that very shortly, but also Marco Bezzecchi, who we talked about in our previous show, had broke his collarbone in a training crash at the ranch. Rumours are Valentino Rossi may have given him a little helping hand towards that, depending on who you ask. Bez had his operation this past Monday, going into that race weekend. Raced on it, didn't take painkillers, and finished in 5th.
That is built different.
That is outrageous. I mean,
that is different. A broken collarbone. I've had a bone bruise on a collarbone. That shit hurts. Broken collarbone, pin that shit back together and ride a 300 horsepower MotoGP bike. Different gravy.
I don't like necessarily, as I said it before, I don't necessarily like endorsing the gladiatorial nature of being a motorcycle racer, but it's hard not to admire the dexterity and the pain management and the determination of a man who's on the outside. He still has an outside shot at winning the title, but realistically, I think he's probably locked into 3rd at this point.
He needs help. He needs help from the front too.
Exactly. He's 60 points back now.
He hasn't helped himself enough this year regarding his own bozo moments.
Yeah, it's weird because we're talking about a guy who's in the middle of his breakout. It's like Bastianini from last year all over again, where it was like, are we evaluating you as like a guy who's only in his like 3rd full-time season and, is clearly incredibly talented? You were kind of in Jorge Martin's shadow when you were in Moto3 and Moto2, and now you've had a breakout year on your own, and like now we're evaluating him like he's a title contender or he's not quite been good enough. And who's the other guy contending for the title? Oh, that's right, it's Jorge Martin again. Hey, Bez must be getting real sick of this shit. Like,
this entire grid has a bozo gene.
Oh, absolutely. No one could put together a fully clean season at the moment. Like, Fabio Quartararo might be our only hope here.
Yeah, he has had, generally, and he has not been all clean either. No. He's had a couple major bozo moments of his own, but he's not doing them with the consistency that everyone else in front and a few behind have been doing.
Right.
Isn't on the equipment to do what we know he's capable of.
Exactly. It's all just, it's all various degrees of mess up in this bitch, without questions. I actually, it almost feels hard talking about Marco Bezzecchi that way because, again, he's having in a vacuum. This is a absolutely insanely good season Marco Bezzecchi has had. He stepped up from, bottom of the top 10 outsider and rookie of the year to genuine title contender. That's a massive leap up for Bez this year. He did what Bastianini essentially did last year out of nowhere. He's completely improved as a bike rider almost overnight. And yet now for evaluating him as a title contender, it's like, a bit disappointing. This sport is weird. This sport is fucking weird. Right.
Speaking of weird.
Yes.
Silly season. Because, contrary to previous rumors, Johann Zarco will not be moved up to Repsol Honda after all. Meaning that we don't actually know who's going to replace Marc Marquez on the orange shitbox. Apparently, the front runner for this is RNF's Miguel Oliveira, who Honda have been openly courting. Should Miggy move? No. And how should Honda play the situation?
This is a strange scenario because, like, when I first gave this some thought about potentially Miguel Oliveira going to Honda, my first thought was no. My second thought was fuck no. But then I thought about it a little bit more, and I'm sitting here going, okay, do you really want to be on last year's Aprilia as well? Like, don't get me wrong, it's a better bike on paper, but you're never going to win anything on the previous year's Aprilia as a satellite customer. That's my thought. And
you'd be moving to HRC as an act of faith that they can get the ship righted.
And that is why I'm not completely slamming the door on this potential move, because I'm sitting here going, well, if Honda can find something, you're now potentially front of the queue. The only opportunity you've got is Johan Mir, who has absolutely struggled to hell and back on this Honda. And Miguel has proven he is a pretty versatile talent. He did very well as a KTM rider, won 5 times on a KTM across both factory and satellite team, especially a rain or dry. He has won multiple MotoGP races in his life, 5 of them. There's not many people on this grid that have won 5 MotoGP races, believe it or not. Only about 5 or 6, if off the top of my head.
A lot of people in MotoGP go their whole career without winning one.
Yeah, he has 5.
Johann Zarco.
Yeah, Zarco is the arguably greatest MotoGP rider who has never won a top flight race. Yes, I think 15 podium finishes without winning. And Zarco is, again, a quality rider. So for me, I don't think this is as straightforward as Miguel saying, it's a Honda. Fuck no. I mean, as Cam, you quite rightly said, it's an act of faith. How much faith do you have in Honda to right the ship?
Absolutely fucking none. Because, I mean, does his health survive that transition? Because all 4 Honda riders have ridden at some point with a major injury this year. Mark, bevy of injuries. Rins shattered his leg. It came out in this previous week that crash, the bone exploded.
Yeah.
The bone actually exploded in Rins's leg. Your bones are not meant to explode.
Generally speaking, no.
No. Mir has been concussed more times than I can count, and Taka Nakagami is still nursing the fact that he basically has half a hand. Like, would his health survive that, is my question. Because it's not the fact that the Honda is slow. It's the fact that it wants you dead, your family dead, your house burned to the ground, etc.
It will kill you, your mother, and your children. Yes, that is a problem. And I openly admit the previous 2 minutes was me trying to talk myself into an argument. Like on paper, you avoid Honda like the plague. But I genuinely do understand why Miggy would consider it. He's openly said he would consider it.
Still delicious COVID. I mean, it's HRC, and it's the biggest. Even in a disastrous era, they're still the biggest factory around. They still have the biggest budget. They still have the most R&D potential, which just shows you how bad things actually are. That everything's going on, and yet they are still this bad. But if they find a path forward, they will win again.
Absolutely.
It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when.
And how many riders can say in their career they were given a factory HRC contract offer?
Not many.
Not many. And look, there's contract shit to dispute here as well, because apparently Miggy does not have an escape clause in his contract.
Honda would have to buy him out.
Yeah,
Honda they got the money.
They got the money. The question is, do you want Miggy that badly? Don't get me wrong. If you're Honda, you've not got a better option.
You don't have enough bodies to throw at the problem. You're out of bodies. 2 of your factory riders just bailed while under contract.
Rins is gone. Marquez is gone. You're not promoting Johann Zarco, which I do not understand why. If you're Honda, look, Johann Zarco, say what you will about him, is arguably the most versatile talent in MotoGP. He's ridden for 4 different manufacturers now, and he's had good success with at least 3 of them. He's ridden your Honda before. Okay, briefly.
He wasn't terrible.
No, he was
wasn't great, but he wasn't terrible.
He was a fine midfielder on the Honda when he filled in over there, when he jettisoned himself out of KTM. Like, that was the only factory he didn't really perform with.
But where KTM was then and where Honda is now, there are very different levels of buried. One was buried beneath the ocean. One is in the Earth's crust.
My point is, if you've got Johann Zarco in your wing, you fully utilize him. I don't see what you do putting him on an LCR.
Well, now Honda's running 4 full factory bikes at this point. I mean, it's at this point, I think, given the internal state of that team, they're just throwing shit at the wall and seeing what sticks. And I mean, you're going to have next year, if we put this on paper, you would have Miguel Oliveira, Johan Mir, Johann Zarco, and Taka Nakagami.
It's still a very powerful lineup.
That's still one of the best lineups that you could put together. If you put together if you'd pulled out of MotoGP Fantasy, you could do worse than that. I just think whoever throws a leg over that bike is fucked regardless.
You have a MotoGP world champion, you have a 2-time Moto2 world champion, and Miguel Oliveira, who is one of the most talented riders that has not won a world championship in any class he's been in. Like a runner-up in Moto3 and a runner-up in Moto2. A guy that was very nearly beat Francesco Bagnaia on the exact same bike in Moto2 4 years ago. The talent on I cannot stress this enough. The ceiling on Miggy is huge. He is absolutely.
Well, and often in his time in KTM, right? It was just however hot or cold he blew was however hot or cold the KTM was blowing on a given weekend, because we know that's what that team does. They still do it. It's just that Binder, who, one of the Rider of the Year contenders up to, I'd say, pretty recently, because what the fuck is he doing the last couple races? He's been a mess.
Wrong side of the aggression line. He's normally very good at being on the right side of that line.
Not this time.
Not this time.
I just don't think. I don't think riders are going to fix what's wrong with Honda.
No.
I don't think that, no matter what feedback you bring, if the engineers keep handing you the same thing over and over again, it's not going to matter. The Honda riders were united in their front of what they needed out of the 2024 prototype. Marquez throws a leg over it, laps for a few laps, and said, "Yeah, it's still shit,"
and leaves.
It has all the same problems, and then he bailed. Alex Rins got out of there as fast as he possibly could with a performance clause,
and went to Yamaha. You don't cross that line.
Reek. Up against Fabio Quartararo, who, if nothing else, is very established on that bike, and you could not get someone on that bike to get more out of it than Fabio is doing this year.
Yeah. This is also, what's amazing? One of the most valuable people that Honda have lost, and I've not even mentioned their name until now, Cal Crutchlow. Cal Crutchlow was an outstanding development rider. He really was. There's few people on the planet that know more about bike racing than Cal Crutchlow.
Yeah. Well, and look at what he said pretty much every year, up to the crux of Honda's problem. The last 2 years, the bike just keeps getting worse and worse. The only person who can do anything with it is Mark. Because he looks at Mark's data, he goes, I understand it, but I can't do it. But the fact that he can even understand it speaks to his quality as a development rider. He's gone to Yamaha, he's told him, look, your direction is wrong. You actually need to take power off of the bike, because by adding power, you've just ruined everything that the bike was good at. Yeah. Your aero direction is wrong. Your engine direction is wrong. And for all I've just praised Fabio's request of, just add power and I'll deal with it, hasn't really worked.
Yeah, like you're still talking about a 24-year-old young rider that probably doesn't have the level of experience to make that sort of demand about what makes a quality bike tick and turn, because Cal Crutchlow's been doing this for over a decade. And he was a damn good rider in his own right. At his very best, he was a MotoGP race winner and, one of the best independent riders in the sport. That's what Crutchlow could do. And he did that on a Yamaha and a Honda. He was just a quality rider across the board. That is an invaluable sort of guy to have in your back pocket. And Honda lost him too, alongside Pedrosa, who's done great work at KTM and turning them into a genuine, viable factory contender. And right now, the second best team in MotoGP. He's a huge part of what's made them successful. And
the approach that Ducati and KTM have taken is, rather than build what you think is the fastest and find someone to ride it, irrespective of what it's like to ride, they've been all about the bike.
Right.
Give the best bike to your riders, the most usable bike you can, and see where that gets you. And if you get the right person on that bike, it works.
Yeah.
Ducati has a couple of them. KTM has Brad Binder. Needs to chill a little bit.
Still in his best season in MotoGP, mind you.
Well, KTM's best season as well.
Yeah.
In terms of competition, at least.
Yeah, Binder's a top 6 guy before. He's a top 4 guy now. Like he's getting closer, but he's not quite in what we would call title contending sort of range just yet. But you're absolutely right. I mean, yeah, that's the state of the camp. And well, let's look a little bit bigger, because this is an interesting article that's done the rounds in the last couple of days. And not like again, if Matt Oxley and David Emmett are praising somebody else's work, then I will always
sit up and listen.
Yeah, you sit up and listen because they're the best in the business, and 2 wheels all 4 as far as I'm concerned. And yeah, there was an interesting article from a guy called Dario DeWet. Sorry if I mispronounced his name. He put it on his Medium website, and the article headline "Why Dorna Sports and Why MotoGP Needs New Shareholders and Fast." And Dario is a massive. I speak enough in the background there. Weird. No, I'll say like he's a huge MotoGP fan, and he spends a lot of the article gassing up how great the sport is, which is always a good start with me, because he's right. He's speaking from a fan perspective who has knowledge about how the sport works as a business, and he wrote an intriguing article saying that there's rumors going around that Bridgepoint, the parent company of Dorna, is considering selling their stake of Dorna Sports that obviously runs the MotoGP commercial wing, essentially. Very similar to how Formula One management runs Formula One as a sport where, obviously outside of the FIM as a governing body, for example. It's a very intriguing article with a lot of interesting theories about what the sport needs, where it's at, and where it's been. Now, I put in big capital letters, must read, when I put this in my set list. And I did read it this afternoon, and I was like, I mean, what did you make of it, Cam? Because I'll tell you where I feel about it, because I was like, thank God someone with some clout has been saying what I've been saying for the last 2 or 3 years.
Don't really have a lot to add on that, and to kind of TLDR it, you have kind of a perfect storm where you've lost your biggest star, the person who made your sport as mainstream as it was with Valentino, and the heir apparent, the most marketable guy in the wake of Valentino, snapped his arm like a twig.
Yeah.
In the meantime, and in that vacuum, we've not really had a public-facing star emerge out of the remaining riders. The closest thing has been Fabio, but Fabio's not on a competitive machine either. No. He's no longer he's not fighting up at the front anymore. And even then, his appeal outside of France is relatively limited.
Yeah, like it was the exact sort of article that I needed to validate a lot of my passing thoughts about the state of the sport. You look at the situation right now and you go, the last 3 world champions that MotoGP has had in the Marquez broken arm era, as I like to now nickname it, Johann Mir, who had 25,000 Twitter followers and he won the world title.
Yeah.
I've seen Formula One fan accounts with more range than him.
And he snuck that title because really, he didn't think of him as a title contender. It's like, it's going to be one of the Yamaha boys, or it was going to be Andrea Dovizioso. As it turns out, Ducati had a disastrous year in 2020. The new tire casing did not work for them. Ironically, having such a disastrous year then laid the foundations of what they are now. The beat him down 9,000. And Mir snuck through and he didn't win it in a flashy way either. He just rolled the points, and he kept rolling points. He almost won it without a win. One race win on the year. Yeah. You have Fabio, who has more or less been demoted from perennial title contender to backmarker this year as a result of his equipment. And you have Pecco, who, well, when people cite how great he is, and don't get me wrong, Pecco Bagnaia is great.
Absolutely.
People just say, he's on the best bike. And the people who use that as the gotcha are getting a little bit of that gotcha in play because Jorge Martin is pushing him on the same equipment.
It's weird because we never talked about MotoGP in that sort of... look, maybe it's because Dorna has chased the Formula One bag so hard, and they've been very blatant in chasing Formula One's bag in the last half decade or so. that they've now taken some of that fan mentality with them, because we talk in Formula One all the time about how guys dominate with best machinery. We never really did that in MotoGP. We had Valentino Rossi, who won with two different manufacturers. We knew how the sausage was made with MotoGP in the late 2000s to early 2010s, when it was a two-bike sport. It was either you won on a Honda, you won on a Yamaha, or you were Casey Stoner. He was the exception, and he left Ducati to go to Honda to make it a two-bike sport again afterwards anyway. So, like, now, a decade later, we're kind of in a weird sort of crux sort of situation now, where instead of it being we just didn't care, now apparently we care more, because as a result, it's kind of taken the shine off Francesco Bagnaia, because he's no longer the only person that can maximize the Duke. Because Martin's been able to do it, Bez has won multiple races this season, and Bastianini won 4 races last year as well. You know, it's kind of further highlighted that it's a Ducati sport at the moment.
Yeah, and on top of that, the fact that the on-track product isn't what it was a couple of years ago because of the aero, because of the ride height devices, where now the on-track action is much more like that you know, the big car, big tire aero era of F1 in 2018 to 2019. If you got up behind someone, there's just nothing you can do about it.
Right.
And that's with the help of DRS in Formula One, which, as we talk about when we talk about Formula One, it's a necessary evil. Even these cars, and no matter what your opinion is on these regulations, the 2022 and 2023 cars are better at following and fighting than the previous gen cars. But they still need DRS to help mitigate their problems, because it's not an engineer's job to make something that races well.
No.
It's their job to make it fast. And every time you develop regulations, the engineers it's what they're paid to do. They're there to find the holes and punch the holes in the regulations. And if the sport can't regulate them to keep that balance, you get what we have in MotoGP right now, which is the dirty air fest.
It's all about micromanagement.
You have to keep the balance between the engineers running unchecked and regulating your sport.
Yeah, we're not going to pretend like we're in a great place with the on-track products right now, because it's not what it was, 3 or 4 years ago, before aero really became the prevalent benefactor of this sport, where we were getting bangers week in, week out. It's not like that in MotoGP at the moment. We're relying on crashes to provide drama. And look, that's the one piece of Dario's piece that I didn't agree with. Them were trying to say, we need to put the heroism at the forefront. No, you don't. You need to try and create a more entertaining product at the moment. It's like
the heroism should come from the riding of the bikes, not the crashing of the bikes.
Correct. We don't need that shit. Like that heroism is why Marc Marquez missed 4 years of his prime.
Yeah. And I mean,
the one bankable star you've got.
Yeah, and we would gas it up every week on the show as well. And we're guilty of it too. Watching this dude
of it. Absolutely.
The most batshit insane saves you've ever seen. Well, eventually, there's one he couldn't save that snapped his arm. But it's just this perfect storm of, you don't have a great on-track product. It's still impossible to watch in the United States unless you're Dorna and you charge my card early on the free trial. And cost me $160. It's expensive as hell to watch it in the US.
Yeah.
It's expensive to watch it in a lot of places. You don't have a bankable star right now, because the guy who is winning, people complain he's on the best bike due to what I call the footballification of motorsport fandom, the 04 Yankees Red Soxification. Your person sucks because I say so. Believe me, I live just north of Boston. I lived it.
Oh yeah, it's
Yankees fucking suck.
It's people coming.
Fuck you, King. Yeah. Still mad about the Aaron Rodgers comparison, and then never forgive him for that.
No,
but you have all of that, and then you get all of that together, all in the space of about 2 years.
Absolutely. Look, and all these things have hit the sport in the space of the last couple of years. It's not ideal at all. It's not all the sport's fault. Like I said, he could have never facilitated Marc Marquez breaking his arm, and then the freakish incidents that have come as a result of that. And like I said, he lost 4 years of his prime as a direct result of that, or indirect result of that even. You know, like, Johan Mir came out of nowhere to win a world title, which, you know, you'd think would be great, but they didn't promote that anywhere near enough, and it was when the world wasn't watching. It was at the
most
time.
Notable. You know what the most notable discussion was around Mir winning the title? It was after he won the title, when he was like, "Ooh, am I going to run the one or not? Find out." And then he didn't. Yeah. And then Fabio gets his title back that he probably should have won in 2020 and fucked around and found out.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you know, that title as well, people mitigated that too, because Pecco couldn't stop crashing on what was clearly a vastly superior motorcycle. And then the Ducati's so superior in 22 that that's all people could say. So you have one after another of titles where people go, yeah, but did they really?
Yeah.
And the only one who was really established before then as a star was Fabio, fighting with Marc in 2019.
100%. And they also mentioned in the piece that, you know, well, what now? And 2024 is going to be a 22 race season next year. The biggest MotoGP calendar ever. Starts back end of March, goes all the way to the third week of November. It's a massive season. We're going to Kazakhstan again, which is a really nice way of saying we're going to Hungary next year.
Yeah.
You know.
And at the same, and then you stack on top of that a questionable calendar, and you stack on top of that, I mean,
questionable format,
because if you had bankable stars this year and you had breakout stars, a bunch of them have gotten hurt,
and then you got the political factor of it as well, because Carmelo Esperalta, who's the CEO of Dorna, didn't want KTM to have 6 bikes, which would have absolutely solved the Marc Marquez and Pedro Acosta problem right there and then.
Because you have another star waiting in the wings with Acosta, and we just had to fire one of the riders into the sun, and it was the guy who almost died to start the season.
Paul Espargaro. Yeah. Look, this time at Honda did not work out, but again, another quality bike rider, Moto2 world champion, quality independent with Tech 3 multiple times over. He's a sensational rider, always has been.
It's just, you know, all of these hitting all at once, and then the racing product is not going to get any better in the short term. If anything, it's going to keep getting worse, because the aero is going to continue to develop. The ride height devices on the backs of the bikes, which, by the way, we had another catastrophic failure on, and it put Zarco out of this race.
Yep.
Ban that shit.
Please do, for fuck's sake. Again, honestly,
you have the provisions. It's a safety problem.
Indeed. We're talking about,
and I'm not shocked.
Yeah, we're talking all about that. We were getting riders hurt left, right, and centre. We've still not had a full Grand Prix with the full grid at best of health, because Alex Marquez pulled out of the weekend on Friday after his ribs were still causing him issues. He couldn't breathe. He was in so much pain.
Breathing is relatively important.
They tried having their own DTS clone in MotoGP Unlimited, and they botched it. It was far too Spanish centric, and people in other countries weren't interested. That didn't help either. You know, so they've tried a lot of F1's tricks off the back of their big popularity boon of the pandemic era, and it's not worked. That
no matter what you are, despite the fact that I resent the words that are going to come out of my mouth, because I love many categories in motorsport, they don't always love me back. Sports car racing this year especially. But they ain't Formula One.
No.
And Formula One can, for better and for worse, usually for worse, kind of just do shit and have it work, because they have so much pull.
Yeah, they have so much money and so much capital and resources and the clout of a 75-year-long cultivated fan base that talk about Formula One in a much more mainstream popularity like than MotoGP has ever had. Like, you know, that they can just do what they want. and chances are it will work.
F1 had more in the past year or so, past 2 years. When I talk to people, when I hear people out in public, they talk about Formula One in the US, which was never a thing when I was a kid. That market is beginning to crack. MotoGP literally does not have a presence here. No. When they should be pushing for some of the same thing, because the US is a huge market. And there's still a huge motorcycling culture here, even if it does get made fun of on South Park for assholes revving their Harleys at lights.
It's the same here in the UK. Like, we had a captive audience of over 1 million watch MotoGP when it was free to air on BBC Two.
And that too.
Yeah, it was on free to air, and it was getting 1 million viewers a race on BBC Two. It's gone to BT Sport. It's pulling 1/10 of that now.
If you ever want to kill viewership of your event, you put it behind a paywall.
I got the numbers for the British Grand Prix earlier this year. 105,000 watched that race in the UK.
Literal 10th. You got the math spot on.
Yeah, and you know they had 55,000 at the Grand Prix. There's no the hardcore biking audience of the UK is dead, and I would still argue it's one of their biggest markets.
They're not doing themselves any favor trying to reach out to it because they just aren't.
Yeah. It's why they want Jay Dixon to front that new docuseries that Warner Brothers wants them to push, because they want a British guy to front it. It's not much good if he's in Moto 2 now, is it?
No. And I mean, what coverage is Moto 2 and Moto 3 gotten? Because
none.
It feels like they're basically forgotten at this point.
They are now back to what Formula One does with its junior categories. They are world championships as of their own right, but people don't care on a mainstream level. So there's a lot of little things adding up here that are not helping, and honestly, there is no quick fix.
Yeah, things in isolation. So these things in isolation would not be that big of a deal. It's when they snowball. It feels like it's been snowballing really since 2020.
Absolutely.
Or really, even I could say before that, when Valentino began to decline. Because Valentino Rossi, love him or hate him, biggest star that the sport has ever seen. He made it a mainstream feature.
He wasn't the rev counter on the car. He was the dashboard, the steering wheel, the engine, the brakes, suspension unit. Marc Marquez might have been the rear bumper by comparison. That's just how it is, unfortunately, and that's where the sport's at the moment. And it's certainly, like, I can't disagree with the overall premise of the article. Dorna needs to bring in some people with financial clout that's prepared to invest in this sport at a massive level and kick the door down when it comes to the sporting landscape. Because right now they're suffocating compared to Formula One. There's no question about that. You know, they're trying to build off their blueprint, and it's not working. That's how it is.
You can't copy the blueprint when, at the end of the day, F1 has that power because they're Formula One, and for no other reason.
Yeah,
and that enables them to do the good and terrible things that they do.
Absolutely. We'll talk more about that probably next week when we talk about the
Max Verstappen experience comes to the United States.
now with a trophy that looks like a fleshlight. Google it, folks.
You know,
be careful. Be careful what comes up.
I'm stealing your line. I'm stealing your line before we came in here. If you put your dick in it, does it light up the colors of your country? Like the Japan trophy.
Apparently you got to kiss it. I'm sure there's some sort of app for us that says which country the race winner comes from. Yes. You kiss the trophy and it lights up in your colour. Isn't that beautiful? Please like our dumb sport. Anyway, yes, Formula One has its United States Grand Prix this weekend with Max Verstappen, and yeah, I like COTA. Could be a fun race. We'll have to wait and see.
The past few races of COTA have been pretty solid.
Yeah, should be a good one. I hope. We can only hope it's a good one anyway. MotoGP is back this weekend for the Australian Grand Prix at Phillip Island.
We're eating.
Yes.
We're eating.
Yes.
The best track in motorcycle racing. I can't wait for these bikes to somehow make that place a procession.
If we do that,
that's when it dies. That's when the sport's dead to me.
If we do that, we're quitting MotoGP coverage for the rest of the year. Phillip Island. So that'll be a fun doubleheader next week on Motorsport 101, where we talk about that. And Formula One at the Circuit of the Americas, Hamilton Land, as I like to call it. Should be a fun weekend. Looking forward to how that gets down. You know where you can find us at Dre_WTF1, at CBuckley917, at Motorsport_101, Motorsport 101 pod on Instagram, our website, motorsport101.com, Patreon, again, /Motorsport 101 if you want to back us financially on there. We'll be back next week for the Australian Grand Prix from Phillip Island and Formula One's United States Grand Prix from COTA. Until then, I've been Dre Harrison. He's been Cam Buckley. Until next time, sayonara.
Oh, God, that's Suzuki with a steel chair.